Hi everybody, welcome to Afterburner. I'm Bill Whittle. Those of us who've done just a little basic handiwork around the house have gotten used to running a wood screw quickly and easily into a 2x4 with a power drill, and every now and then most of us have to do it the old-fashioned way with a screwdriver and what seems like an incredible amount of muscle power. Same thing with a hand saw and a power saw. We utterly take for granted what a useful and efficient servant electricity has become until we have to do the heavy lifting that the genie does without complaint. Now, everything from washing machines to dishwashers and all the rest, it's utterly taken for granted. We take the electric light for granted, too. It's very hard for modern Americans to envision a world where life pretty much came to an end when the sun went down. For us, candles are something we light when we put on Barry White. It's a nice, warm, dim, romantic glow. The idea that we'd have to read and write letters in that murk, or clean weapons or prepare breakfast, is utterly unthinkable to we who can turn night into day by the mere flick of a switch. Coal heaters threw a tepid warmth for a radius of just a few feet, providing someone got up an hour before everyone else and paced the frigid floors to get it lit in the morning. And let's not forget that places like Miami, Florida, and Phoenix, Arizona were settled by men in linen suits with paper collars and women in hoop skirts and corsets before air conditioning was even a gleam in someone's eye. As I said, we take all of that for granted. The way we're starting to take 24-hour entertainment and 24-hour access to the world's information base, not to mention most of our family and friends through electronics and the internet. But what if all of that just went away? What if it was just suddenly lights out? I'm talking about losing the electric grid, and there's any number of ways that that could happen. It could happen naturally. For example, back in 1859, a gigantic solar flare, more properly known as a mass coronal ejection, caused enormous electromagnetic disruption of the incredibly crude, well, by modern standards anyway, telegraph systems of the time. This one incident, called the Carrington event, generated so much electromagnetic energy that some operators received electric shocks off of their equipment. Telegraphs are just essentially a thick copper wire with iron mechanisms at each end. Anything like the Carrington event today would not only fry electronics, it would completely overload our transformers. And even worse, the Earth's magnetic field, which does so much to funnel these high-energy events to the poles where they show up as aurora, well, that may be about to flip. There's growing evidence that the field is weakening dramatically, an indication that the North will become south poles and vice versa, which happens on an average of every 450,000 years, and which lasts for about 1,000 years. 1,000 years without the magnetic shield that was in full effect in 1859? No, another one of those events, lights out. Detonation of a nuclear weapon above the United States, just one, produces a similar effect, in this case called EMP, for electromagnetic pulse. This also fries electronics and brings down electrical substations. One nuclear weapon, again, just one, in the hands of a rogue regime like Iran or North Korea, could take down the nation's electrical grid and send the United States back to the Stone Age for a year or two or three. Cyber attacks from, well, anywhere really, but most likely from Russia or China or both, can destroy or disable the entire electrical grid by tricking the computers that control them into issuing destructive commands. An enemy nation could black out this country without launching a missile, in fact, without even firing a shot. It might be very difficult to place the blame. And finally, in the terror attack that no one's heard of, a group of gunmen with AK-47s not too long ago shot up the transformers at a power station that powers all of Silicon Valley. In this coordinated, well-planned attack, they cut the data cables that control the station and shot holes in the coolant that keeps the transformers at operating temperature. Now, as it turns out, they cut all of the data cables except one. They missed one. And engineers were able to shut down the station before it essentially melted. That was just a few men with rifles. We think if the lights go off, we'll just have to live with flashlights or candles for a few minutes or an hour. No. Any one of these scenarios would black out the country or the region for between 6 months to several years. Even after a major storm or disaster, power is usually restored in days or at most a few weeks. This is not like that at all. Now, for example, the powerful transformers that we use in these relay stations are not modular, and we don't have a giant cave full of spares. Each one is unique to the stations, about the size and weight of a locomotive, and we don't have any just sitting on the shelf. It's going to be dark for a long time while they remake them. So we think, well, okay, well, no internet, no TV, that's inconvenient. Look, assuming we can dodge the millennials as they leap off the tops of buildings, the rest of us would be in for a much worse surprise than that, namely food and water shortages, because no electricity means no pumps, and that means no fresh water to drink, no showers, no brushing teeth, and no flushing toilets. 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, let that sink in. And of course, with the electronics in modern trucks cooked as well, and no power for refrigeration, we don't have the means to transport and preserve the vast amounts of food that our cities need each day. Plus, ATMs are down, streetlights are out, alarm systems are down. Look, we saw what happened in Ferguson with the power on. Now, you would think it would be the job of the government to protect us against this kind of thing, and you'd be right. Both parties have simply chosen to ignore this issue because, well, because it hasn't happened yet. They know the risk. It just costs a lot of money to buy backup units, and to protect these facilities, harden them is the term. And the government has entitlements to fund, and the power companies don't want to raise rates, and each points at the other, and nothing has happened yet, so they keep pointing. You know, NASA engineers knew that there were problems with the O-rings on the solid rocket boosters. There'd been indications of burn-through, but nothing had happened. Then Challenger happened. Likewise, the new foam had been shed from the external tank many times, and nothing had happened. Then Columbia happened, and it'll be the same with this. We'll close the barn door once the horsepower has escaped. You need to write your congressman about this. It's important. It's bipartisan. And it's one of the few things the government is actually supposed to be doing. Because, my friends, if we keep ignoring this threat, we're in trouble.